Hey everyone. This time we're going to be talking about something a little bit different. We're not going over a retro game, we are going over a modern game. I've been playing a lot of Monster Sanctuary lately, and there's just something about it that I really like. It was kind of hard for me to sort of pinpoint why I liked it, and that's part of the reason I wanted to do this video. So let's get into the game really quick and just see what's going on with it, and I'll explain a little bit more about just why I enjoyed the game.
So, what is Monster Sanctuary? It's, aside from the fact, a really great game. It is a side scrolling monster collecting RPG. So, think of something like Pokemon, but that doesn't really explain everything. Granted, I'm probably going to use the phrase, it's kind of like Pokemon a few times, but that's not the whole story. In this, you have a party of 3 monsters, and you fight other monsters. You also have to fight the bad guys, who are the alchemists, and you sometimes have to get into duels with the other spectral keepers, most of which are cool. I think Will's pretty cool. He's one of the spectral keepers. And then there's Julia, who's pretty awesome herself. And then there's Leonard, and he's an asshole. And that's putting it in a nice way. He's kind of just an arrogant asshole. And then there's you. You can either be a boy or a girl. You can get some different costumes along the way, and yeah, you're kind of a bland person, but that really depends on how you want to play. A lot of your dialogue and everything is played out through your specter, or your spectral monster, I should say. And yeah, it works pretty well. It's sometimes helpful. Sometimes it's kind of a forgetful monster. God. Yeah, sometimes it can be a bit forgetful. It has a much better grasp of the English language than I do, though. So throughout all of this, you are basically hopping around on platforms, either fighting or avoiding monsters, depending on how you're feeling at that particular moment. And you are solving some puzzles in order to go ahead and advance in the game and in the story, that sort of thing. The whole map is kind of laid out like Metroid, or in this case Metroidvania, because Castlevania decided it wanted to grab onto Metroid's game style, but whatever, that's a whole different conversation that isn't relevant here. So yeah, you have a few obstacles you need to overcome, and that's where your monsters come in. They have different abilities that they can use. They can break down walls, they can activate different orbs that they find, they can levitate you for a little bit, which really isn't levitation. You just kind of grab onto the ones that fly and you hold on tight and they try to fly you as far as they can. It's kind of adorable and kind of, mean at the same time. Let me talk a little bit about the monsters here. I'll go into more detail with just how the mechanics and everything of this are laid out. Right now, let's just talk about the monsters and the combat a little bit. What's kind of fun, it's fun, but it kind of reinforces that this is more of a starter RPG. Once the battle's over, you don't need to go back and heal your monsters anymore. So the battle's over, they all get reset to, full health, all of their, status effects are taken away, that sort of thing. I kind of like it, just because it lets you focus on other parts of the game that I feel are more fun. But at the same time, it kind of made me, it kind of made me feel like I wasn't playing like a real, I shouldn't say that. I wasn't playing like a more advanced RPG. It works for this game, but if it was in another game, I probably wouldn't like it as much. I think the story in this game is pretty cool. Again, it's a little bit like Pokemon, where you're a kid who's been sent out into the wild for some reason, well, I shouldn't say for some reason. You're given an explanation of why, and it makes a lot more sense in this one. Uh, yeah, that's something I'll get into in just a second when I talk about some of the games this reminds me of.
So there were three games that I kept thinking about, or games that sort of reminded me of Monster Sanctuary. Not the entire game, but just different parts of it. Let's go ahead and get into those really quick.
So there are three games that this reminds me of. One of them you're going to think I'm crazy, but that's fine. I don't really care that much. The first is Legend of Zelda on the NES. It just feels like I'm playing a version of that. Not the exact same thing, but I got the same feeling playing Monster Sanctuary as I did when I first played Legend of Zelda. It was kind of that fun blend of like action and adventure. It felt different from the other games that I had played at the time. In the case of Monster Sanctuary, it just kind of feels a little bit different from the other games that I have been playing. The other is Pokemon. I picked Pokemon Red here, but it could have been any of them. That's because of just the monster collection stuff that's going on in this game. It's because of just the way that it feels like it's more user-friendly. It's kind of more... It feels like something that you could point to and say, if you haven't played an RPG before, try this. It introduces a lot of the mechanics that are pretty much in every RPG, and it does a good job of kind of explaining what's going on. The big differences are, in Pokemon, you can only use one monster at a time. You go out and you catch them. And it's not as random as Monster Sanctuary is, where you might not be able to catch the monsters in Monster Sanctuary because you're relying on them to leave an egg behind. And then you can hatch the egg and then you get that monster. With Pokemon, you have to weaken the Pokemon, throw a ball, and normally it's going to work. You're going to catch it, with a few exceptions. It's very simplistic, Pokemon is, and it feels like Monster Sanctuary is a step in a different direction. It's a little bit better in my opinion, and I just kind of like it a lot more than I like Pokemon. It still reminds me of Pokemon, but I like Monster Sanctuary more. And then the art style and kind of the gameplay and everything else reminded me of Final Fantasy Mystic Quest. If you're a fan of Final Fantasy, you might think, oh god, why that one? Unless you've kind of played the game again, you've revisited it, and you realize Mystic Quest isn't bad, it's just different from the other Final Fantasies. It's a starter RPG. That was what it was designed to do, was to introduce people to RPGs. But its pixel graphics are very good, especially for, 1992, 93. That's what reminds me of Monster Sanctuary. Monster Sanctuary has very good pixel art, and it feels very, very nice and easy to get into. So, yeah, let's go ahead and talk a little bit more about the game mechanics and everything. So really we're going to be talking about the kind of the fighting mechanics in this. Each monster has a few affinities that they're basically aligned with. So you can have a monster that, does fire air attacks, but it's weak against water, or it's weak against earth, and that sort of thing. And that's kind of universal throughout a lot of RPGs. You have fire, and that's, greater than earth. You have earth, which is greater than water, water greater than air, air greater than fire, that sort of thing. It's basically creating a triangle effect on this. Think with Fire Emblem, where they have their three weapons, axe, sword, spear. I'll show that later on. And you kind of just have, axe greater than sword, sword greater than spear, spear greater than axe. I might have that a little bit out of order, but that's kind of a basic idea of it. That's what Monster Sanctuary is based on. You have your monsters that are kind of aligned to different elements, and they have a few other things as well. They might be, strong for physical attacks. They might, be weak against magic, and it doesn't necessarily matter what magic, they're just weak against magic. You might have some elemental attacks or magical attacks that, well, not really magical, but you might have some like an earth attack that is only physical, it isn't magical, so it won't work against a monster that's weak against magic attacks. There's a lot that goes into it, and I think that's where they move away from kind of being a starter RPG. They don't just stick with that simple triangle and then they don't bring in like the stuff that reverses the triangle. I know I'm bringing that up a lot, but that's kind of the core mechanics for a lot of RPGs. This is where it's like Pokemon, but it goes past that, where it isn't just a simple rock paper scissors. It's rock paper scissors, baseball bat, shotgun, fireball, all those other things that you created out of nowhere to cheat at rock paper scissors when you were a kid. And it sort of adds to the charm of the game and adds to the complexity.
So as we come to an end here, I just want to thank you guys for listening to me. I know this one has been a little weird. It doesn't really have a lot to do with retro games. It's got more to do with sort of modern indie games. And you might see a few more of these. I don't know if they're all going to be in the Talking Pixels category or if they're just going to be like standalone videos. I didn't want to do a first impressions on this because it just didn't feel like a first impressions video anymore. I've kind of been playing it for a few days now, and that sort of moves it past being just like a first look at the game. So again, thank you guys for listening. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please let me know in the comments below, and have a great day, everybody.